Welcome back to Whispers of Time. Imagine this. You have been studying English for years. You memorized grammar rules, learned hundreds of vocabulary words, practiced exercises in textbooks, and yet, the moment a native speaker stands in front of you and says something as simple as, "Hey, how are you doing?" your mind goes completely blank. Your mouth stops working. The words you practiced 100 times suddenly disappear. You just smile awkwardly and say nothing. This is not just your struggle. This is the silent pain of millions of English learners around the world. And almost nobody talks about why it truly happens. The answer is uncomfortable, but it is important. Studying English and actually using English are two completely different things. Real English does not live inside grammar books. It lives in supermarkets, restaurants, offices, phone calls, and everyday conversations with real people. That gap between knowing English and speaking English is exactly where most learners get stuck. And today, we are going to walk straight into that gap and figure out how to get through it. The wall every learner hits. Picture a learner. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah studied English for 3 years. She passed her exams. Her grammar was nearly perfect on paper. But when her company hired a foreign colleague, and that colleague walked over and asked, "Hey, do you know where the meeting room is?" Sarah froze completely. 3 years of studying, and she could not answer one simple question. She went home that evening feeling embarrassed and defeated. She thought to herself, "What is wrong with me? Why can I read English perfectly but cannot speak a single sentence when it matters?" That question, that exact feeling, is where real learning begins. Sarah's problem was not intelligence. It was not talent. Her problem was that she had never practiced the thing that actually matters: starting a real conversation. Why starting feels so impossible. The hardest moment in any English conversation is the first 3 seconds. That is the moment when your brain floods with questions. What should I say first? What if my grammar is wrong? What if they do not understand me? What if I sound foolish? And because of those questions, many learners choose silence. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect sentence, the perfect confidence, and that perfect moment never arrives. Here is the truth that changes everything. You do not need perfect English to start a conversation. You only need courage. The sentences that begin real conversations are not complicated. They are actually the simplest sentences in the entire language. "Hi, how are you? How's your day going? Nice to meet you. It's really cold today, isn't it?" These sentences look almost too simple, but they are powerful beyond measure because they open the door. Once the door is open, the conversation walks in on its own. The overthinking trap. Sarah made another mistake that most learners make. She tried to build every sentence perfectly inside her mind before speaking it out loud. She would think of a sentence, check the grammar mentally, worry about pronunciation, reconsider the word choice, and by the time she was ready to speak, the moment had already passed. This habit, mental translation and constant self-checking, is one of the biggest enemies of fluent communication. Real conversations do not wait. They move forward naturally, quickly, and imperfectly. The solution is not to think less. The solution is to practice more, so that simple sentences become automatic. When you repeat, "How are you today?" enough times out loud, your mouth produces it without asking your brain for permission. That is how fluency actually works. Confidence is not something you find before speaking. It is something you build through speaking. One conversation, one sentence, one word at a time. Every fluent English speaker you admire once stood exactly where you are standing right now, nervous, uncertain, and afraid of mistakes. The only difference between them and a silent learner is simply this: they spoke anyway. Your journey forward begins with one small, imperfect, courageous sentence. And that one sentence changes everything. Most people think the hardest part of learning English is passing exams, memorizing complicated grammar rules, or understanding difficult texts. But the truth is something else entirely. The hardest moment is much simpler and much more personal than any of that. It is the moment you step out of silence and speak your very first word to a real person. And the learner who fears that moment stays trapped in silence for years, no matter how many books they finish. But where does this fear actually come from? And more importantly, how do you get through it? The real problem: English learned away from life. Imagine someone who studied English for 3 years. They read textbooks every single day. They completed grammar exercises. They memorized vocabulary lists. They scored well on tests. Then one day, a foreign visitor approached them and asked something as simple as, "Excuse me, do you know where the nearest cafe is?" And that person froze completely. Not one word came out. This is not a paradox. This is a system problem. Because the English learned inside a textbook, and the English used in real life are two completely different things. Inside a textbook, everything is organized, slow, and predictable. In real life, conversations move fast, take unexpected turns, and your brain is forced to respond immediately. If your brain has never been trained for that speed, it stops. Like a computer with software installed but never actually run. The program exists, but it does not work. The solution is simple, yet most learners completely overlook it. English must be practiced inside real life, not only inside books. Daily life, the most powerful classroom. The most powerful practice does not live in a textbook. It lives inside your ordinary daily routine. When you wake up in the morning, try describing your actions out loud in English. I woke up early today. I'm making breakfast. I need to get ready. These sentences look almost too simple, but that simplicity is exactly their power. Why? Because these sentences come directly from your real life. You're speaking about things you already know, already feel, already experience. Your brain is not struggling to force unfamiliar information inside. Instead, it is expressing what it already understands in a new language. That process is easier, faster, and remembered far longer. One learner tried this simple habit. Every morning while walking to work, they described everything they saw around them in English. "There's a lot of traffic today. The weather is really nice. I'm running a little late." After just 1 month of this daily habit, they noticed something remarkable. Sentences were leaving their mouth before their brain had even finished forming them. That is the sign of real change happening. Verbs, the foundation of everything. When you begin practicing English inside your daily life, you quickly notice something important. The same verbs keep coming back again and again. Wake up, eat, go, work, study, watch, sleep, talk. These verbs appear every single day, in every conversation, in every situation. And that is actually very good news. It means that if you can use these simple verbs automatically and comfortably, you can already handle the majority of everyday conversations. Most learners chase advanced vocabulary and complex expressions. But real conversations are built on the simplest verbs. I went to the market. I talked to my friend. I finished work late today. These sentences are plain, but they describe real life. And language connected to real life sinks deep into the brain and stays there. Questions. The force that keeps conversations alive. Most learners think that speaking English means giving answers, but the real force that keeps conversations alive is asking questions. Imagine someone tells you, "I went to the mountains last weekend." If you say nothing, the conversation dies right there. But if you simply say, "Oh, really? How was it?" the conversation continues. The other person talks, you listen, and after listening, you ask again, "Did you go alone or with friends?" That is a real conversation, and it was built not with complicated grammar, but with simple, curious questions. Questions carry another powerful advantage. When you ask a question, the pressure shifts away from you. The other person speaks, and you listen, think, and slowly find your own flow. You do not need to be the one talking the most to be a strong communicator. Being the most attentive listener is sometimes even more powerful. Language learning is not a race. It is a road built one step at a time, one sentence at a time, one question at a time. And on that road, the most important thing is never perfection. It is simply consistency. Consistency. That single word carries more weight than most learners realize, because the learners who improve the fastest are never the most talented ones. They are never the ones with the highest test scores or the biggest vocabulary lists. The learners who improve the fastest are simply the ones who show up every single day and practice, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when progress feels invisible, even when mistakes pile up faster than successes. But consistency alone is not enough. You also need to practice the right things. And one of the most overlooked right things in English learning is this: knowing how to express what you feel. The missing piece: emotional language. Most learners can describe what they do. I wake up at 7. I go to work. I eat lunch. I come home. These sentences are useful, and as we talked about before, practicing them daily builds real fluency over time. But real conversations between real people rarely stay on the surface of daily routines for long. Real conversations go deeper. People talk about how they feel. They talk about what excites them, what worries them, what makes them happy, what exhausts them. And the learner who can only describe actions but cannot express emotions will always feel something important is missing from their conversations. Imagine this. A colleague walks up to you and says, "You seem a little quiet today. Are you okay?" If your emotional vocabulary is limited, you might say, "I'm fine," and end the conversation there. But what if you actually wanted to say something real? What if you wanted to say, "Honestly, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed today. I have too much on my plate right now." That sentence, honest, natural, and human, creates real connection. And real connection is what makes conversations memorable. Building emotional vocabulary step by step. The good news is that emotional vocabulary does not need to be complicated. Just like the simple verbs we talked about earlier, emotional language also has its most common, most useful words, and those words appear again and again in everyday conversations. Start with the basics. Move beyond good and bad and fine. Those three words are the walls that trap most learners inside shallow conversations. Instead, practice words like excited, nervous, relieved, frustrated, proud, grateful, overwhelmed, calm, disappointed, motivated. These words are not advanced, they are simply honest. One learner made a small but powerful habit out of this. Every evening before sleeping, they wrote 3 sentences in English describing how their day felt. Not what happened, but how it felt. I felt really proud of myself today. I was a little frustrated in the morning, but I calmed down later. I'm feeling grateful and tired right now. After several weeks of this, something shifted. When real conversations touched on feelings, the words came naturally, because they had been practiced in private first. Tone of voice, the invisible part of communication. Here is something most English courses never teach. The words you choose are only half of emotional communication. The other half is how you say them. A sentence like, "I'm fine," can mean completely different things depending on how it is delivered. Said with a warm smile and a relaxed voice, it means everything is genuinely good. Said quietly, with eyes looking away, it tells a completely different story. Native speakers read these signals automatically, and as your English grows, you will begin reading them too. This is why listening practice matters so deeply. Not just listening for words and grammar, but listening for tone, for rhythm, for the emotion underneath the sentence. When you watch someone speak English naturally, in a video, in a conversation, anywhere, pay attention not only to what they say, but to how they say it. That invisible layer of communication is what makes language feel truly alive. Solving problems politely. When conversations get difficult. Real life does not always go smoothly. Misunderstandings happen. Mistakes happen. Sometimes you need to ask someone to repeat themselves. Sometimes something goes wrong at a restaurant, or at a store, or at work, and you need to handle it calmly in English. This is where many learners feel completely lost. They can manage simple, pleasant conversations, but the moment something goes unexpectedly, their English disappears. The secret to handling difficult moments is not more vocabulary. It is polite, calm, simple language. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you say it again, please? I think there might be a small mistake here. Could you help me check? I really appreciate your patience with me. These sentences are not complicated, but they are powerful because they keep communication respectful and calm even when the situation feels stressful. One traveler recalled being completely lost in a foreign city, unable to find their hotel. Their English was not perfect, but they walked up to a stranger, took a breath, and said clearly, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm completely lost. Could you help me find this address?" The stranger smiled, helped them, and even walked part of the way with them. Not because the traveler's English was perfect, but because it was honest, polite, and human. the deeper truth about fluency. Fluency is not speaking fast. Fluency is not having zero grammar mistakes. Fluency is not sounding exactly like a native speaker. Real fluency is something quieter and more powerful than all of that. Real fluency is the ability to express your thoughts, your feelings, your questions, and your needs clearly enough that another person understands you and connects with you. That is it. That is the whole goal. And when you look at it that way, you realize you are probably much closer to fluency than you think, because you already have thoughts worth sharing. You already have feelings worth expressing. You already have questions worth asking. The only thing standing between you and real communication is the daily habit of practicing those thoughts, feelings, and questions out loud. In English, imperfectly, consistently, and without fear. Every day you practice, you are not just learning a language. You are slowly building a version of yourself that can connect with the world in a completely new way.